Welcome to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast, episode 127.
Welcome to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast with your host, Jack Mountain Bushcraft School founder and Master Maine Guide, Tim Smith.
I'm your host, Tim Smith. I'm a registered Master Maine Guide and have been a full-time outdoor instructor and guide since founding the Jack Mountain Bushcraft School in 1999. We help people become more skilled, more knowledgeable, more experienced, and more confident in the natural world through our bushcraft and guide training semester programs and multi-week canoe and snowshoe expeditions. You can check out the show notes to all of our podcasts at blog.jackmtn.com. If you're interested in learning more about our college-accredited and GI Bill-approved programs, visit the Jack Mountain Bushcraft School on the web at jackmtn.com. And check out our online network and digital learning academy at bushcraftschool.com. Hello and welcome back to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast. We're recording this on Tuesday, July 2nd, 2024. It's right after lunch. We're hanging out in my kitchen and I'm joined by Oz and Jesse from the last several episodes. And we're here to talk about two things really. Self-care, taking care of yourself, and planning for 2025 and some of the implications for that. So since we last spoke, you and I, Oz, had that wide-ranging philosophical discussion. Something's happened.
Yeah, because the universe loves to feed me my own words. Very harshly, too. No, I decided to do the right thing and get up and work out like I'm supposed to. And, of course, I was doing deadlifts and something popped in my back. And that was it. I laid on the floor in there for probably 30 minutes deciding whether it was going to be 911 or Tim that I call. But I ended up getting up and... I'm starting to move now, but I'll tell you what, and we'll get into it shortly, but taking care of yourself prior to definitely helps with recovery and recovering quickly. So
we just figured this would be an interesting jumping off point to talk about, because we've been talking about solo canoe expeditioning, and obviously we're always interested in talking about guiding trips and expeditions and what are just the implications there. Like, I've had my back go out on a snowshoe trip once, right? I was we were thankfully only like a mile from the end of the trip, and it was the end of the trip, and I had it go out, and that was the longest mile I've ever walked. I had to crawl some of it. It took me to walk a mile, the better part of like probably 3 hours, because I'd maybe get like 8 steps and then I'd have to stop and take a knee and then could get up, and then it'd be like, I'll do 7 this time and take a knee. And it's just the screaming pain, like backs and teeth, right? When they hurt, you can't think of anything else.
And you can't escape. There's no escape.
Nothing.
You can't lay down and fall asleep and, I'm just going to sleep through this pain. You can't lay down. There's no comfortable position. There's no nothing.
Yeah,
so
it's unbelievably bad.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine snowshoeing.
It was awful. Like, I still am like gun shy when I think about that trip. Like, kind of get the heebie-jeebies. So I guess, from the perspective of a guide, your responsibilities is, number one, do you have the skills, and are you equipped to help someone who is in that situation, right? Say someone has a back go out, and we've had it. I think it was the canoe expedition a couple of years ago. We had that happen twice, basically. Two men broke their bodies in the middle of the North Maine Woods. And I'll never forget the first guy, good friend of mine, shout out to Colin Clifford. We were loading boats.
What's up, Colin?
Was it the last day?
Yeah, it was.
It was the last day of the trip. We're loading boats and we're above Allagash Falls. We were at Taylor's Landing. And he was lifting a heavy piece of gear and twisting to put it in a boat. And I just saw him, I just saw his face. And I was like, this isn't good. So I don't remember what he did. He really tweaked it. So whenever that happens on trips, that person, unless it's me, gets to ride in the bow of my boat. And I remember just telling him, don't move, don't try to paddle. Just sit there and try to make yourself as comfortable as possible. And we created like a makeshift crutch for him so he could kind of hobble around Allagash Falls. And I think we did that. I think I had to take an extra 2 trips on that carry because all of his boat, his gear and stuff. So it was probably 5 trips that I was making on that carry, and I still think I finished the 5th one before he made it to the end because he was moving so slowly.
Yeah, he was hurting.
And that's just a hard thing to watch, right? You know, like every breath, even it hurts to breathe. Every breath is pain and misery.
I think everyone understands, though, back pain, and it's one of those pains that it's easy to give empathy for because we've all kind of experienced it, and it's not one of those pains that people will lie about often because when it's real, you know, you can see it that it's real, right?
You can't stand up straight.
Yeah, right. So it's definitely one of those pains that you're like, okay, this is acceptable. I'll pick up this guy's stuff. So
yeah. So in that situation, all we were able to do was to make him as comfortable as possible and get him out of the woods. I don't know what would have happened if we were further remote. You know, let's say if that happened on a more remote trip than the Allagash. I mean, the Allagash is remote, but there's a couple of bridges interspersed throughout the trip. And if you know where they are, there's ranger stations and they have radios. And I think that was the year that was the first year we had a sat communicator on the trip. So there's always that option as well to radio out or to send a text through the satellite stuff. But yeah, it's a hard thing to deal with. And I think maybe that would be a good thing to figure out, you know, for like any medical course. Because that's a thing that's not unlikely to happen. You know, someone has a back issue, especially a lot of people, middle-aged people who tend to go on guided trips. A lot of them are showing up with a lot of pre-existing trauma and, you know, being able to manage that. I think would be a good thing.
Also, as the guide, right? And that's what Jesse was bringing up earlier today was, what if it happens to you and you're guiding?
Yeah, well,
you know, in your
snowshoe trip for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Thankfully, it was the end of the trip.
Yeah, so
knowing how to, I think number one, recognize warning signs. You know, for me, I know I've only had my back like really bother me 2 or 3 times in the past over the course of my life, but I know it's much more likely to happen if I get dehydrated. So if you're being lazy around camp, just drinking coffee, not hammering the water, probably much more likely to have an episode.
Makes sense.
And also, I think the idea of maintenance rather than trying to fix it once it's broken.
Yes.
So the idea of like taking care of your core muscle groups. You know, if you're lifting something heavy, do it with proper form.
And I think that's what's helping with my recovery is I usually wake up first thing in the morning and I usually stretch for about 30 minutes, depending on how I feel. So I feel like I get a lot of movement in my spine and in general. So yesterday when I hurt myself, I immediately just started going into those stretches, and I probably stretched altogether for probably 8 hours yesterday. And I think that's why when I woke up this morning, I felt easily 50% better. It's just, I think my body's used to moving and it didn't lock up, right? And also just when you eat a proper diet, you don't have as much inflammation, which isn't going to lock in those issues in your spine or in your muscles because you're not going to fight inflammation as much. That eventually is going to relax and then everything can kind of be adjusted back into where it needs to go. So I say that, but who knows? I'll probably be crawling tomorrow morning, but we'll see. We'll see.
Tough to say, right? You never know.
It makes me think how like the small injuries that you get when you're learning this stuff can be really good teachers, actually. Like the guy that cut his hand last week, he's probably going to be, you know, it's going to be months before he ever cuts himself again because he's going to be so much more aware and conscious.
Yes. I think that's also, for me, it was realizing, oh, I'm 44 years old. My back just went out, right? So being aware of not only your skill level, but like how old you are and maybe how well you can see or how well you can still lift things, or just taking into account a more real look at your skill levels or your strength or whatever. So
yeah,
I have a saying that these guys get tired of hearing, and they hear it a lot when we're canoeing, is that we're going to control everything that we can control. There's certain things, if we're in the wilderness, we're on a remote river, there's a lot that we can't control. And one of the ways to mitigate all that unknown is to 100% control the things that we can control. So, part of that with regards to knowing your own body, just knowing how hard you can push. And again, recognizing some of the danger signals before there's an episode, I think would be good. But, in thinking about like solo canoe tripping, man, that would be hard if you were literally on your own on a trip and maybe you pushed a little too hard, got a little dehydrated, trying to lift the boat up. But lifting a canoe onto your shoulders, a big heavy boat, that's a significant risk for a back. And that's one of the reasons why we spend so much time working on proper form with that skill set in particular, because what we see, excuse me, young people, young guys, especially when you're young and strong, you think form doesn't matter. But then if you build those bad habits, eventually that's probably going to come back and bite you. Yeah. So that's something that we can control, that we need to control.
I could not imagine that feeling of being remote and knowing, oh no, my back, setting up your tent. Yeah. Right? Setting up, if it's raining, just putting up a tarp, we're tying a ridge line. I don't know if I would have been able to accomplish that yesterday, right? I mean, obviously I would have, right? But there would have been times I probably am doing stuff with my teeth or crawling on the ground right? So...
Yeah, and the literature's full of old stories like that, like guys who, they found him dead in a wall tent and they had burned every stick that they could crawl and get, and eventually they had cash money and they burned some of it, and there's because it's not worth anything to him at that point. Yeah. There's a whole section in True North where he's talking about bad things that had happened, and when they found the guys who had died on the trail, and it's pretty gruesome. It doesn't sound like a nice way to go. Yeah. But just understanding the risks, and we're talking about back pain here, but we could be talking about any injury. Like say if you're not paying attention with your axe and you get a glancing blow and you slice into the side of your foot or something. Yep. That's another thing. How are you going to manage that? So if you're going to be solo or you're going to be remote, safety has to be job number 2 right behind selfie. It's got to be way up high.
And I think that's one of the focuses of the solo course will really be on. That's why it's not such a focus on the trip as much as it's a focus on the skills. Knowing that I actually know these things, right? Being aware of not only my body, but my skill level before I go out. If I am super strong, but I don't know anything about tripping, it might not go well for me, right? But if I know a lot about tripping, but I'm not strong and I haven't trained at all, that might not go well for me, right? So there has to be that balance, and you as a mature person have to know what your capabilities are and how to mitigate those things when they do go wrong.
Yeah, a realistic self-assessment. I think we're trained by Hollywood in our culture where people will watch the movie and, if it's a bad survival movie, the hero's out and, he's almost freezing to death and he can't get the fire lit, and then just one last grunt and burst of effort and he finally gets it done and the day is saved. And that's not how the real world works. No, that's where he's dead. But I think because we're so brainwashed by those hero films and superhero movies, and remember out there in podcast land, a superhero is just a hero who's that much better. He's super.
Sometimes when my wife's mad at me, I take a blanket, I put it on her shoulders. I ask her if she's super mad at me now.
And then you take the blanket out the doghouse. Then you're living in the doghouse for 2 weeks. But yeah, a realistic assessment of your skills, your physicality, the strength you're bringing to the table, those things are just invaluable. I think we can get away with lying to ourselves a lot in the modern world. I'm pretty good at that. I'm okay at that. But then when you're out, and especially when you're by yourself and you got nobody you can call, better to be honest at that point rather than absolutely face the consequences.
So in that same vein of honesty, so after hurting myself yesterday doing the right thing, I realized I should just take up drinking and then I'll never get hurt. and then we'll be good. So
the person in the car accident who's drunk is always the uninjured
That's right. I'll be relaxed.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I'll my next trip to town, I'll get 20 pounds of sugar, and we'll get right on. Right
There we go.
I feel like I've learned a lot about this, like using your energy wisely by watching old timers on the trail, like people in their 70s and 80s who you meet on some river, and just seeing how, you know, they are aware of their limitations. If you're 80 and you're on a remote canoe trip, like, you have to be way more careful, and there's so much less ego. So I aspire to trip more like an 80-year-old, I guess. Like less heroic and more, when you don't have something to prove, you're going to be safer.
That's a tough one. Because, there's some of us that we see those rips or we see that drop and we go, oof, I could probably do that.
Totally.
I should be all right. Yeah, that's a tough one. That's tough to rein that in.
But even if it's not even specific to tripping, like if you watch an old guy who's swung an axe his whole life, like just the efficiency of motion, like no wasted motions, no wasted energy. You got like 100x energy units that you can put out that day and do it again tomorrow. So if you're like a knucklehead and you're going to try to do 500 when 100's your limit, you're going to pay the price. Mm-hmm. So watching those guys work with any hand tool. We were talking about Dick Profanity earlier today, the guy from the Alone in the Wilderness books and movies. And just watching him, do the work with the hand tools and the videos, it's just kind of magical.
So skilled.
No wasted motion. And if you've ever heard of Dick Profanity, when I lived in Alaska in the mid-1990s, he was still alive, and he was a friend of a friend. He lived right across from where I lived, right across Cook Inlet, and I wrote him a letter, and he wrote me back, and I still have the hard copy of the letter. I pulled it out and showed a couple of the guys the other day. And if you Google, like, Dick Profanity letter, I think it comes up first. I scanned it, and it's on the Jack Mountain blog, so if you ever want to read it and you're not here, But basically, I was writing him I think I was 24, 25 at the time, and I said, I'm really interested in kind of living remotely somewhere. Do you have any advice for a young man? And he says, well, kid, the woods aren't going anywhere. Like, don't be in such a rush to run away and live in a remote cabin somewhere. And good advice. Thank you, sir. I think I maybe took it. But now I'm about the age that he was when he went up there, so maybe I'm looking further afield now and be like, okay, maybe now's my time. But there's never time for that, so... probably won't be doing that.
Yeah, your schedule's getting too
gets busier every year. So I'm currently scheduling for 2025, and have been going back and forth with emails. Someone who wants to jump on the 6-month expedition instructor training course. So I just redid that whole page today. We should have the whole 2025 schedule here up and ready to be perused. Like all the big courses, all the immersion courses are currently scheduled. I don't have them on the calendar yet, but those dates are locked in, and then I'm just kind of fiddling with some of the smaller things. But it's funny, the last 2 years or so, we've just seen a huge uptick in interest in the immersion programs, and I'm not sure what it is or why, or if we're on some list somewhere or something, but next year we're going to go back to how we did things before the 2 most recent years, where instead of a summer semester and a fall semester, we'll have a spring semester that starts early when it's cold. And we'll call that the hard start, because it's a bit more challenging than, say, starting when it's, challenging for different reasons. But it's I think it's probably harder to start when it's hot and buggy, like it has been this course. And then we'll have move the canoe expedition back to the summertime, and then we've got the fall semester is always about the same time frame and has been since 2003 when we kind of started that one. So maybe it was 2002 even. And that's the big picture. So the other thing about the 6-month long program, we had a question recently. We've got it on the web as 6 continuous months out here, and we set it up that way so that people could minimize their travel time. We're not close to anything. And sometimes people come from overseas to do a program like this, and if it saves them from having to buy an extra $1,000 plane ticket, all the better. But it doesn't have to be done that way. It's a series of phases. So phase 1 of the expedition instructor program is to take the 9-week semester course and get your journeyman cert. Stage 2 is to take the 4-week canoe expedition and get your engagé level 1 and 2 guiding certifications through us. And then stage 3 is practicum, and that can either be going out and living with a very low baseline or planning and doing a solo trip, but something where you're out on the land actually doing it and living the life. And then stage 4, people come back to the field school and work as a teaching assistant on the Wilderness Bushcraft semester course and get what we're calling now the level 2 journeyman cert, which is where they kind of understand the back end about how the programs are run and, learn something useful about marketing a program and all the record keeping and everything that goes on, so that they could potentially be super useful to somebody running a program or start their own. But that's it in a nutshell. And it's probably better for people to not try to do it all in 6 months, because it's a lot. Like, people get overwhelmed reasonably quickly because every day we're at it and every day we're working hard, and that takes a toll on the body. I think you and I were talking last podcast, Oz, about people tend to get injuries, develop injuries, old injuries come back to haunt them. Mm-hmm. Maybe the demons they thought they were going to leave behind somewhere else, they'll follow you right up here. I can guarantee you that.
Absolutely.
Because, we're on Google Maps. And even those demons know how to use Google Maps.
Now, I will say the one thing I did like about spending the entire time here was seeing the changing seasons.
Yeah.
And then watching the plants as they change through the season, right? And I think that helped a lot with my familiarity. I don't know, just being able to see the season changes were really nice. So if you do break it up, maybe try to hit each season if you can.
Yeah, but just basically I was fielding questions on the internet if that was an option. And yes, it's definitely an option. The other change that we've made in the last 2 years, when we first published that XI page, it's something we have been doing informally for at least 10 or 15 years. But when we first published it, we listed the tuition when you added up all of the component parts of the course. And I think people thought that they needed to pay all that tuition up front. And that's actually a bad idea. It makes it more of a hassle for us, especially if somebody has to drop out for any reason. Then there's all the hassle that comes along with it. So the way that we register people for that is a course at a time. So if phase 1, if you're starting down that road, phase 1 is just register for the one of the semester courses. And then you just let us know. It's a small course. We all get really familiar with each other by about day 2. You just let us know that, hey, that's what I'm interested in doing. And we say, great, and encourage you and work with you. But you don't have to sign up and send us like a big lump sum payment for the whole thing. So maybe 2, for example, there's always the possibility that maybe you were going to do the semester and then the 4-week canoe expedition immediately afterwards, but maybe you got hurt and maybe you can't do that till next year. And then it's just easier for us if we don't have to do refunds and stuff, if somebody needs to drop out. So there's that. So we've got those 2 things, or that thing, the 2025 expedition instructor dates are on the web, and we'll have the rest of the dates for next year pretty quick here. I think that's about all we've got. We've got a busy afternoon planned with these guys to go do background studies on fish and mammals and do a navigation review with Map and Compass. So, yeah, we got about 11 minutes to get down there. So anyway, thank you for listening. If you want to send Oz a care package for his back, just get a couple of crisp $50 bills and you can mail them to me. The address is on the website, and I'll make sure he gets them.
Just lay them right on my back. It'll be
good. Thanks for listening. Hope you have a great day.
Take care.
Take care.
You have been listening to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast. For more information on our professional wilderness guide training programs that are college accredited and GI Bill approved, visit us on the web at jackmtn.com.